No one enters marriage without harboring dreams of happiness. People believe that love will be their foundation, and their home will be a peaceful sanctuary to weather life's storms together. However, some marriages suddenly transform into nightmares when the very person meant to be your life partner becomes a ruthless killer, turning a loving home into a horrific crime scene. Thach the Hoang Ngoc, a young bride of just 20 years old from Vietnam, once held similar hopes. "I will live happily." These were the words full of longing she would whisper to her father before boarding that fateful flight to follow her husband to South Korea and begin a new chapter in her life. However, just 8 short days after arriving in Korea, she was found dead in a pool of blood, her body covered with horrific wounds. So what happened? Let's explore this case together. On the evening of July 8, 2010, the peaceful residential area in Saha District, Busan was suddenly shaken by an emergency call. At exactly 7:25 p.m., Busan Police Dispatch received a call from a Korean man with a trembling, terrified voice, confessing that he had just taken his wife's life. The caller was Jang Do-hyo, a 47-year-old man, the newlywed husband of Vietnamese bride Thach Thi Hoang Ngoc. In a state of mental panic, he repeatedly confessed to the horrific act of killing his young wife. More disturbingly, the man vaguely explained his motive for the brutal act. "I have a mental illness, and demonic voices whispered and urged me to do it." Upon receiving this shocking report, police immediately deployed emergency response procedures. Within minutes, the sound of patrol car sirens pierced the quiet atmosphere as they raced to the couple's private residence in Sinpyeong-dong, Saha District. At the scene, the suspect was found standing and waiting like a statue, still stained with fresh blood, his face empty and soulless. He showed no signs of resistance when restrained, only mumbling incoherent, fragmented words. When investigators stepped inside, they faced a haunting scene. The body of a young Asian woman lying motionless in a pool of blood that had begun to coagulate, identified as Thach Thi Hoang Ngoc, a girl only 20 years old, holding Vietnamese citizenship. The victim's body bore a long chain of brutal violence. Her face was swollen and deformed from severe blows. Her abdomen was bloody with countless deep stab wounds from a sharp blade. Right next to the body, police seized a fruit knife still stained with dark red blood, likely the murder weapon. Initial autopsy results confirmed the victim died from excessive blood loss due to fatal wounds. Throughout the apartment, belongings were scattered in disarray, clear signs of a fierce struggle evident everywhere. However, the most haunting detail was a pristine white wedding dress still hanging in the corner of the wardrobe, creating a painful contrast with the bloody horror scene before them. Just days earlier, the young bride had worn that very wedding dress with the radiant smile of happiness, but now only a cold corpse remained. In this case, the primary suspect was all too clear: the newlywed husband Jang Do-hyo himself. The man who had called to report the crime, confessed his guilt, and all evidence at the scene pointed directly to him. However, what troubled the investigation team was not identifying the perpetrator, but understanding what motive could have driven him to such brutal violence in less than 2 weeks. After being handcuffed and taken into custody, Yang appeared cooperative with the investigation, but was completely mentally disturbed. He frankly admitted to taking his wife's life during a heated argument and insisted he was frequently haunted by an evil voice whispering and urging him to kill. These bizarre statements about demonic control made everyone doubt the mental state of this killer. The experienced investigators' instincts told them this case was not simply an outburst of momentary rage, but concealed secrets from the past that had never been revealed. Meanwhile, the phone call from South Korea had also crossed borders to Vietnam. The Vietnamese embassy in Seoul urgently notified authorities in Can Tho City. In just one night, the poor family in the countryside received the devastating news like a lightning strike. Their daughter, who had just set foot in a foreign land as a bride less than a week ago, had departed forever. Ngoc's parents collapsed to the point of fainting, while relatives and neighbors were all immersed in shock and extreme grief. Hoang Ngoc was born in 1990, the fourth daughter in a poor farming family with many children in Can Tho City. Due to the family's extreme poverty, she was once cared for and raised by a nun in a temple until she finished high school. The most beautiful in the area, gentle and diligent. That's how the villagers always spoke of her. Unable to bear watching her parents struggle to feed 5 mouths in poverty, Ngoc decided to quit school after 9th grade to work and earn money to help the family. At just 18, she followed friends to the city to make a living, faithfully sending home about 1 million dong, $43 each month to share the burden with her family. Living far from home in the city, Ngoc rarely confided in her family about personal matters. Even the fact that she had a boyfriend and was preparing to marry a Korean man, she kept secret until the very last moment. Only when the wedding was about to be held did Ngoc's parents learn of the situation. According to Thach, Ngoc's biological father, during a friend's wedding party in late 2009, Ngoc was introduced to an older Korean man through an acquaintance. After a short time, she came home to announce she had been chosen as his wife through an international matchmaking service. Ngoc's parents couldn't help but worry about language barriers and the significant age gap, a 27-year difference. However, Ngoc firmly insisted this was entirely her voluntary decision, that they could understand each other through gestures, and she hoped to marry a foreigner to seek new happiness, absolutely not being forced by anyone. Hoang and Ngoc's marriage was conducted through an international marriage brokerage service, with all legal procedures carried out at the Can Tho City Department of Justice. According to strict regulations, the couple had to undergo a pre-marriage interview with the assistance of a professional interpreter. Jang Do-hyo answered about 13 detailed questions about his personal background, health status, and marriage motives. The results showed both met all requirements, and the interviewing official detected no suspicious signs. Due to the considerable age gap between the two parties, the Department of Justice specifically invited Hoang Ngoc back for a second interview to ensure she was not being coerced. Ngoc firmly assured officials that she was completely voluntary in entering this marriage to seek happiness and cherished the desire to build a peaceful home. Throughout the long months waiting to complete exit procedures, the young woman enthusiastically prepared everything, diligently learning basic Korean conversation, carefully shopping for belongings, and constantly nurturing dreams of a brilliant future in a foreign land. On July 2, 2010, the wedding of Thach Thi Hoang Ngoc and Jang Do-hyo was held in a warm atmosphere at a restaurant in Ho Chi Minh City with the presence of the bride's family. The groom's side gave the bride's family 3.8 million dong, $163, as ceremonial money, a modest sum with only symbolic meaning. A few days after the wedding, Ngoc brought her Korean husband to visit her hometown in Can Tho in their only visit. They arrived home at 9 p.m. and left the next morning. Before departing, the Korean son-in-law also gave his wife's parents an additional $500 as a greeting gift. On June 30, 2010, Hoang Ngoc officially boarded the fateful flight to South Korea. Before departure, the young woman called home to comfort her parents to rest assured, but who could have imagined that after just 8 short days, the dream of happiness would be shattered and she would be gone forever. From a gentle Vietnamese girl who cherished dreams of changing her life, Ngoc had become an unfortunate victim of an international marriage tragedy that no one in her family could have imagined. After discovering abnormal mental signs in the suspect, South Korean police decided to conduct forensic evaluation alongside the interrogation process. Results showed Jang Do-hyo was completely lucid, able to coherently describe the case's developments, while stating he feared his wife would poison him, so a demonic spirit had ordered him to strike first. Police handling the case assessed this might be a manifestation of paranoid delusions caused by schizophrenia, though they didn't rule out the possibility he was deliberately feigning insanity to escape or reduce punishment. At the scene, police discovered a glass of water and half-finished soup bowl on the dining table. The suspect stubbornly insisted his wife had put poison in the food, but when testing samples, no toxic substances were detected. Jang's medical records were urgently collected and revealed a horrifying truth. He had a history of paranoid schizophrenia lasting 8 full years, with 17 hospitalizations for treatment. The question arose, why was a severe mental patient like Jang able to pass brokerage procedures to marry a foreign wife? Expanding the investigation scope, police discovered this brokerage network, specialized in arranging Korean men to go to Vietnam seeking wives. Giang had registered for this service after failing to start a family domestically due to poverty and mental illness. The brokerage company had arranged for him to go to Vietnam in late 2009, meeting dozens of girls in the Mekong Delta, and Hoang Ngoc was chosen after just a brief meeting. Giang's concerning medical history was completely concealed. The marriage records only stated he had suffered from nervous exhaustion, making no mention of schizophrenia or the 2005 incident of assaulting his biological parents during a mental breakdown. When summoned for questioning, the brokerage company initially evaded responsibility, blaming language differences between the couple for the conflict, even fabricating stories for the media that Yang had only slapped his wife once, causing her to fall on an old appendectomy scar and die. This false explanation was immediately refuted as the family confirmed Ngoc had never had appendix surgery, and autopsy results confirmed she died from knife wounds. The brokerage company was investigated for providing false information and illegal operations, triggering a nationwide crackdown on international marriage brokerage establishments throughout South Korea. On July 7, 2010, national police launched a sweep, severely punishing organizations that falsified customer background information. The investigation also revealed that in less than 10 days of living together, marital conflicts had erupted continuously. Language barriers made communication difficult. Giang didn't speak Vietnamese while Ngoc was nearly helpless with Korean. Giang's circumstances were extremely poor, unemployed, and living on allowances from his parents, quickly shattering Ngoc's dreams of the promised land of South Korea. She had no other support besides her husband, but this very man had stopped taking psychiatric medication right after the wedding, causing the illness to relapse severely. He increasingly fell into paranoid delusions, suspecting his wife didn't truly love him, even becoming obsessed that she intended to harm him. The tragic climax occurred on the evening of July 8th during dinner, when a violent psychotic episode erupted. Giang imagined his wife was putting poison in the food, so he screamed accusations and then lunged into a frenzied attack. In his delusional state, he grabbed a knife from the dining table and repeatedly attacked his wife's abdomen. Within just a few short minutes, the young bride had collapsed in a pool of blood, and upon regaining consciousness, Giang called police to confess. On July 19, 2010, police completed the file and transferred it to Busan prosecutor's office to prosecute Giang Do-hyo for murder. The investigation report frankly admitted this was a painful consequence of serious loopholes in international marriage management. When victims weren't protected from domestic violence risks, while perpetrators who were mental patients weren't prevented from marrying, the case became the focus of public attention, forcing both South Korean and Vietnamese governments to jointly review all marriage brokerage policies and measures to protect foreign brides. Giang Do-hyo's trial opened publicly at Busan District Court on August 10, 2010, attracting special attention from both Korean and Vietnamese media. In the audience were representatives from the Vietnamese embassy, women's rights organizations, and many Korean citizens expressing sympathy for the ill-fated bride. The defendant appeared in court looking haggard, with empty, soulless eyes. First, the court conducted an assessment of his behavioral capacity. Results showed that despite suffering from severe schizophrenia, at the time of the crime he still had sufficient cognitive ability, only affected by hallucinations, so he must bear full criminal responsibility. This conclusion rejected the defense attorney's efforts to seek reduced charges due to the defendant's loss of control from illness. Throughout the trial, Giang Do-hyo broke down crying multiple times, recounting how he had voluntarily stopped taking medication before and after marrying, leading to demonic voices returning to haunt and urge him to kill. His lawyer cited his paranoid fear of being poisoned, hoping the court would consider leniency. However, the prosecution strongly refuted this, emphasizing the extreme severity of this crime. The victim was an innocent young bride, brutally murdered just 8 days after marriage, shocking all of society. The prosecutor argued that despite having mental illness, the defendant was fully aware of his condition before marriage, deliberately concealed his medical history to get married, then voluntarily stopped medication, causing him to lose control. This was an aggravating factor. The judicial panel agreed with this prosecution view. The courtroom fell silent when images of Hoang Ngoc smiling in her wedding dress were presented as evidence. Many present couldn't hold back tears thinking of the tragic fate of the young Vietnamese woman. Though the victim's parents weren't present in court, they had sent a power of attorney through the Vietnamese embassy requesting the court judge strictly so their daughter's soul could rest in peace. The South Korean government also showed a firm stance. Foreign Minister Myung-hwan met with the Vietnamese ambassador, presenting 10 million won, $8,500, to support the victim's family, while committing to handle the case strictly. Public pressure from both countries made the court understand that the public was expecting an appropriate verdict. At the trial's conclusion, Busan District Court sentenced Jang Do-hyo to 12 years imprisonment for murder, while requiring the defendant to undergo mandatory psychiatric treatment throughout his sentence. After completing his prison term, he would also be required to wear an electronic monitoring device for an additional 15 years to ensure he wouldn't continue endangering society. This sentence was considered quite severe within the penalty framework for mentally ill criminals in South Korea, as typically if deemed completely insane, defendants could escape imprisonment. Nevertheless, many opinions in both South Korea and Vietnam still felt 12 years imprisonment wasn't commensurate with a young woman's life, though the long-term treatment and monitoring measures were highly praised for preventing recidivism. In 2007, another case in Malaysia shocked public opinion with equally haunting brutality. July 29, 2007, was a memorable day filled with joy for Mr. Hoang, a man of Chinese descent. He and his Indonesian domestic helper entered a newly acquired apartment, excitedly preparing for thorough weekend cleaning before moving in soon. The apartment was located in the prestigious Bangsar area of Kuala Lumpur, a building over 5 years old that mainly attracted wealthy foreigners. Bangsar was dubbed a paradise for the upper class, with a prime location just 0.75 miles from downtown Kuala Lumpur, a 15-minute drive by car. This area stood out with green spaces, low population density, top international schools, and high-end commercial, shopping, and entertainment services, creating strong appeal for foreign communities and local wealthy classes. Mr. Hoang had paid 400,000 Malaysian ringgit, $95,000 for this apartment 3 months earlier, an attractive price 1/3 lower than market value. This opportunity came from the apartment being sold through foreclosure auction when the previous owner defaulted, forcing the bank to repossess the property. Mr. Hoang had quickly seized the opportunity and became the lucky winning bidder. However, what he couldn't imagine was that this apartment was hiding a gruesome secret. 2 days earlier, on July 27th, Mr. Hoang had finally received the keys to his new home. He and his sister had visited the apartment to check its condition. Since the previous owner had stopped paying electricity bills long ago, the apartment had been shrouded in darkness for over 3 months, with a dim, messy scene covered in dust. The living room was piled with cardboard boxes and a bed covered with a sheet. Entering the kitchen, they saw a refrigerator sealed tightly with tape strips. Although the entire apartment looked quite deteriorated, none of them sensed anything unusual. The next day, Mr. Hoang visited the apartment twice but made no discoveries. It wasn't until July 29th, when they thoroughly cleaned the house, that they accidentally discovered a horrifying secret. On the afternoon of July 29th, at exactly 3 p.m. upon entering the apartment, Mr. Hoang began sensing a strange foul smell wafting through the air. When the Indonesian helper carefully removed the sheet covering the bed, a horrifying scene appeared. A pool of dried black-red blood spread across the surface. The bed was also riddled with scratches from sharp objects. What made both even more frightened was that Mr. Hoang now noticed blood spatters on the walls. This chain of terrifying signs made him immediately associate it with the unpleasant odor from when he first entered and the mysterious refrigerator sealed tightly with tape. With anxious anticipation, he and the helper began slowly tearing off the tape strips. When the refrigerator door was finally opened, a thick, foul stench that had been accumulating suddenly burst forth violently, quickly enveloping the entire room. Both stood stunned, completely overwhelmed by the sight before them. Inside the refrigerator, bulging black garbage bags were stacked on top of each other, having leaked terrifying, sticky liquid. Horror filled both their hearts. Mr. Hoang realized that all the signs in the room pointed to one frightening truth. This definitely wasn't some rotting animal. In panic, he and the helper quickly divided tasks to contact building security and call police. The first to arrive was a security guard on duty in the building. He didn't dare touch the disgusting, sticky garbage bags, only carefully using his foot to gently nudge one of them. After listening to the sound it made, he worriedly informed Mr. Hoang that there seemed to be bones inside. He immediately contacted the head security guard. All three didn't dare touch any items in the room, only standing and waiting anxiously until police arrived. Fortunately, police quickly arrived at the scene. After thorough and professional examination, they discovered the horrifying truth. Inside these 5 garbage bags were a total of 11 pieces of human remains along with a skull. The body parts were in severe decomposition. The reason the foul smell hadn't spread outside was precisely because the refrigerator was sealed tightly with tape strips. Through meticulous forensic examination, experts determined these body parts all belonged to the same male victim. Notably, the cuts on the remains were made neatly and sharply, showing the perpetrator had certain skills. However, all the victim's internal organs had completely disappeared, apparently deliberately removed and discarded, likely to minimize the spreading foul odor. What made everyone even more horrified was that the victim had also been brutally skinned, showing extremely savage and cruel methods. The blood spatters on the walls could only appear when the victim was stabbed with sharp objects using strong force. If they were just ordinary cuts, blood couldn't create such spatter patterns. With an estimated time of death over 1 year, forensic examination to accurately determine the dead person's identity became extremely difficult. However, fortunately, the investigation team had collected many important clues inside the apartment. Scattered throughout the house were photos and English books and newspapers. Particularly, among the photos were images of a male-female couple photographed together, showing an intimate romantic relationship. Additionally, police discovered a driver's license copy with the name Nora, precisely the woman appearing in those couple photos. Inside the cardboard boxes were also some men's clothing. Through investigation, police determined the man in the photos with Nora was her husband, Ngoc. Nora was confirmed as the previous owner of this apartment, who couldn't repay the home loan, so the property was repossessed by the bank and auctioned. When a serious murder had occurred right in this apartment, both naturally became prime suspects. Therefore, police immediately deployed a campaign to find them. The case, with its horrifying brutality and complex, mysterious details, quickly became the media focus. The media frenzy attracted intense public attention. The very next day after discovering the body, on the afternoon of July 30th at 1 p.m., Nora, in a striking red outfit, suddenly appeared at Jalan Hang Tuah police station in Kuala Lumpur to voluntarily surrender under escort by her private lawyer. After 2 hours of work, she was transferred to Brickfields police station to cooperate with the investigation process. Nora was 33 years old, born and raised in Selangor State. Her father once held a senior position at the Selangor Bowling Association, while her mother worked in aviation. In her youth, Nora was a talented netball athlete with bright prospects, even selected to represent Selangor State in the 1990 Malaysia Games. In 1991, when her parents' marriage broke down, she and her younger brother decided to live with their mother. To focus completely on studies, Nora decided to temporarily set aside her promising athletic career. Her academic efforts were worthily rewarded when she received a prestigious government scholarship to study finance at New York University, USA. After completing her undergraduate program, Nora entered the flight attendant profession. It was in this work environment that fate arranged for her to meet Ngoc. The relationship between them quickly developed from friendship to deep love. After some time, Nora shifted her career to information technology at a computer company. In 2002, despite strong family opposition, she still firmly proceeded to marriage with Ngoc. Shortly after the wedding, Nora bought the apartment in Bangsar, precisely the place that later became the horrific crime scene. The couple had moved to live there since 2005. In her first statement to police, Nora insisted that her husband, Ngoc was currently mysteriously missing. According to her account, just after a short time moving into the new apartment, he suddenly disappeared without a trace, possibly having become the victim of a murder case. She implied that the horrifying body parts discovered in the refrigerator might very well be her own husband. However, Nora firmly denied any involvement in this matter. She insisted the only motive for her surrender was to clarify her identity as the previous owner of the apartment, not to admit any guilt. Indeed, this woman possessed beautiful looks, a slender figure, and gentle, soft speech, characteristics completely opposite to the image of a brutal killer. Associating her gentle appearance with this bloody, horrific case truly made many people find it hard to believe. Through preliminary investigation, police determined Ngoc was 39 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, a businessman with Singapore citizenship. However, a major obstacle appeared when throughout the entire apartment, the crime scene, no personal documents of Ngoc could be found to prove he was the victim. Additionally, he had no relatives living in Malaysia, making identity verification more complex. Faced with this situation, Malaysian police proactively sent fax documents to Singapore police, hoping to receive assistance in contacting the victim's family and relatives for DNA comparison testing, an important step to accurately confirm the identity of the deceased. Meanwhile, after thoroughly reviewing records, police discovered a noteworthy detail. Ngoc had never had any missing person reports registered in Malaysia. When the media learned this information, it created a search frenzy. Journalists began racing to verify every possible clue while reviewing all missing person reports from the past 2 years. The founder of Singapore's crime library told media that in 2005, a woman named Goh Seng Chu had contacted them seeking her missing brother, Goh Ngoc. This organization operated a free website specializing in posting criminal cases, including missing persons. They requested Seng Chu provide a police report and bring copies along with recent photos for processing, but she couldn't provide them. The matter was therefore stalled, and Seng Chu never appeared again. So it seemed Nora had known early that her husband was missing, but had never reported to police or sought outside help, which was truly abnormal. And this apartment had been auctioned by the bank after being vacant for a long time, previously occupied by Nora and her husband. Forensics indicated Ngoc was murdered over a year ago, so how could she not know what was hidden in her home refrigerator? Faced with waves of suspicion from police, Nora maintained a surprisingly calm demeanor. After enduring 6 hours of intense and detailed interrogation, she suddenly completely changed her previous statement. This time, Nora admitted knowing about her husband's death while accusing the real perpetrator of being her secret lover. Confronting a woman who continuously changed her statements, the investigation team felt this second version seemed more credible. From a practical standpoint, it was extremely hard to believe a single woman could alone carry out the entire process of brutal murder and dismemberment. Moreover, when analyzing technically, experts assessed that handling the cuts on the remains showed semi-professional skill, requiring certain knowledge and expertise. When examining Nora's personal background, there were no signs she had ever been trained or had experience in this field. From the above analysis, the possibility of Nora having accomplices in the case became very high. As for the authenticity of having a lover who had fled, as in her statement, this seemed quite reasonable and worth deeper investigation. The case was then determined to be a complex love affair. At this point, Malaysian police appeared quite confident about successfully solving the case. Kao Cheng Hua, head of Kuala Lumpur's Criminal Investigation Department, confidently declared his complete faith that this case would soon be thoroughly resolved. However, what he couldn't foresee was that subsequent developments would be much more complex and difficult than initially predicted. After deploying in-depth investigation, police couldn't find any trace of the secret lover Nora had reported. Faced with this dead end, the investigation team decided to return to the scene for more thorough examination. In this investigation, they made an important discovery. At a hidden location in the apartment, police had obtained an object suspected to be the weapon used in the case. Simultaneously, through efforts to contact the victim's family in Singapore, police succeeded in contacting Ngoc's mother and older brother. After taking samples and conducting DNA comparison testing, the final results definitively confirmed that the murdered man was indeed Ngc. With the weapon evidence discovered, police once again summoned Nora for questioning. Faced with this undeniable evidence, Nora had a fundamental change in her statement. This time, she completely abandoned stories about the mysterious lover and frankly admitted she had personally killed her husband a year ago. The entire process she described could be said to be extremely brutal and cold-blooded. According to Nora's new statement, Ngoc frequently committed domestic violence against her. After a fierce argument, she took advantage of when her husband was drunk and unconscious to end his life. What followed was even more horrifying. Nora had used 3 consecutive days to systematically dismember her husband into 11 pieces using a power saw. All internal organs were discarded in the communal trash behind the building, while remaining parts were carefully packaged into 5 plastic bags and hidden in the refrigerator. What made everyone most chilled wasn't the murder act, but Nora's terrifyingly calm attitude afterward. She continued living normally in that apartment as if nothing had happened, until several months later moving back to her mother's house. From when she left the apartment, she completely stopped paying mortgage payments, leading to the bank being forced to repossess the property for auction. Simultaneously, not paying utility bills had caused the apartment to lose power, allowing the body in the refrigerator to gradually decompose in darkness. In fact, since February 2007, some residents in the building had begun sensing strange odors emanating from this apartment and had made complaints. However, no agency or individual implemented any inspection measures. On August 5, 2007, exactly 1 week after the case was discovered, Ngoc's mother and older brother finally arrived in Kuala Lumpur. Under strict escort by 3 police officers, they came to claim their relatives' remains. Due to severe decomposition, the family decided to immediately cremate in Malaysia, then bring the ashes back to Singapore. 2 days later, both had boarded flights returning home. So was Nora truly the lone perpetrator in this shocking murder case, as her confession claimed? Based on the address on her driver's license, reporters visited Nora's home in Subang Jaya. According to investigation, this house was jointly owned by 3 people: Nora, her mother, and younger brother. Since 1990, when the house was completed, the mother had lived there continuously. However, about a year and a half ago, the house was sold for 200,000 ringgit, $47,600, to a middle-aged couple. According to former neighbors, this family was quite secretive and rarely socialized. Nora frequently worked in Singapore, seldom visiting home. She only returned during major holidays, especially Christmas. In neighbors' eyes, Nora was a kind woman with a gentle, mild appearance and soft speech. Notably, they had never met Nora's husband, so for a long time everyone thought she was still single. When hearing news of Nora's involvement in the shocking case that stunned public opinion, all neighbors were extremely shocked and completely unable to believe this gentlewoman could commit such brutal acts. However, they also revealed a noteworthy detail. Every time Nora came home, loud arguments with her mother would occur. Neighbors had become accustomed to this and never intervened. Despite Nora's confession, police still felt deep skepticism about her ability to single-handedly complete this entire chain of brutal actions. According to their hypothesis, Nora might have used stimulants after killing her husband and continued using them throughout the 3 days of dismemberment. They didn't even rule out the possibility she had maintained use of these substances throughout the entire time living alone after committing the crime. Police analyzed that at that time, Nora might have fallen into a severe mental disorder state. Perhaps she wanted to destroy the body to conceal the crime, but only partially executed it, discarding organs while leaving other parts without thorough disposal. However, the investigation team also had to consider the possibility this seemingly weak woman was playing scapegoat for the real perpetrator. Therefore, they needed to continue deep investigation to verify the authenticity of her statements. However, since the case occurred over a year before discovery, many important pieces of evidence had been erased by time, making the search for truth extremely difficult. Surprisingly, when appearing in court, Nora once again completely reversed her statement. She declared that previous confessions were all made under pressure and wrong guidance from police. Nora insisted she was completely innocent in her husband's death and applied for bail. During the period from August 12th to August 27th, due to insufficient evidence to charge Nora, police twice allowed her bail on her own recognizance. This form of bail meant the suspect was free to go out without paying bail money or submitting identity documents. Throughout this time, Nora appeared extremely comfortable and calm, seemingly completely unaffected by the serious case underway. September 19, 2007 marked an important turning point when police officially submitted the investigation report to the deputy public prosecutor. That afternoon, after reviewing the entire file, the deputy public prosecutor concluded this case lacked sufficient evidence to charge anyone. Based on this, he issued instructions for police to release the suspect unconditionally. This decision meant from that point, Nora was completely free, no longer obligated to regularly report to police. Despite this, police still insisted that, although Nora was released, they would continue maintaining the investigation. If additional convincing evidence emerged in the future, they would consider reopening prosecution. However, time continued passing day by day, month by month, year by year. To this very day, this case still has no significant developments, becoming an unsolved mystery. The question of how Ngoc died and by whose hand remains an eternal enigma. The truth about this bloody case has sunk into oblivion, leaving questions that will never have answers. This case seemed to close but left deep marks on society, causing waves of intense attention and debate. Public opinion split into two clear camps with opposing views about the truth and trial results. One segment of the public firmly believed Nora was the real perpetrator. They argued that the entire chain of behavior and her continuous statement changes all pointed to one undeniable truth. She was directly involved in the case. According to this view, Nora's escape from punishment was simply due to police lacking ability to gather convincing evidence, not because she was innocent. However, the other side had a completely different perspective. They supported the view that law must be fair and objective. In a transparent judicial system, the principle of innocent until proven guilty must be absolutely respected. When there wasn't sufficient and convincing evidence to prove Nora committed a crime, releasing her was the right decision consistent with the spirit of law. They believed you cannot convict someone based solely on suspicion, no matter how reasonable those suspicions might seem. Do you think Nora is the murderer of Ngoc? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching and see you in the next videos.